Okay, one of the last things I want us to see about this is just using the basics of what I've shown so far, like knowing the basics about some permissions and file paths and variables and that kind of stuff. I want you to think about how you could start to automate some of your simplest tasks that are repetitive. In other words, let's think about one of the most repetitive tasks that you might have to do, especially in the context of a competition. You might have a task like bringing your networking online, right? And so if I think about my networking in a Kali machine, if I have my /etc/network/interfaces file, something like this, you'll see I've got a file that's been configured to have some networking information. It's possible if I wanted to, I could take this type of information, I could take this and say, let's automate it to the point of, in case someone needed to quickly go and reassign an IP address or recreate something like this, like we could, with the knowledge we've done so far, make a quick little script in order to do this. And so let's maybe see a way that we could do that. And what I'll do, instead of starting with a blank file, I'll actually kind of cheat and just copy my interfaces file. All right, so let's do that. I'll copy my /etc/network/interfaces file because the file is good right now, and I'll copy it to my home directory. All right, so now in my home directory, I've got this interfaces file. Sure. And why don't I actually call it like my interfaces? Well, I'll rename it at the end. All right, so let's go into this interfaces file, but I'm going into the one that I've copied in my home directory. I'm not actually breaking the one that I've already started with. So I'll nano into this interfaces file and I'll see. Okay. Now, right now, of course, this is the configuration file. This is not a script, but I could turn it into a script and use the data that's in here kind of as the starting point. And so I could have something like this where I say, well, the first line of a script should be that shebang line, right? /bin/bash or /bin/sh. Most of our systems, it won't really matter. Okay. But then we could also think about like, okay, if I wanted to make this a script, this is going to try executing now these things as commands. And I don't really want these things to be commands. What I want is these things to be information that get written to a file. And so I could have a path variable be this /etc/network/interfaces file. And so now if I take any information and write it to path, that would take that information and put it into my real interfaces file. And so if you think about a lot of this, if I had to change my IP address, most of these lines, I don't have to change at all, right? Most of these would be untouched. And so I could, if I wanted to rebuild the entire file as part of my script, the script will do it in the snap of a finger. What I could do is just do echoes here, right? I could echo out this information and redirect it to my $path. And so now if you're thinking about this as far as like, what is the information that I want to go in my script? Like now I'm taking information like this commented out line and I'm rewriting it to my interfaces file. And it's important to notice that I'm using a single redirect here because that will wipe out the entire file, right? I'm rewriting the file as a way to perhaps remake my script. I could do it again by saying echo the next line, but this time I'll close my parentheses and then say this one will also get added to $path, right? But as I'm doing this now, this time I use a double redirect because I don't want to overwrite this line. Of course, I want this to be an append. I could even do it for the blank lines. Like I'll keep all of the exact spacing. So I could say echo open parenthesis or open quote, close quote, and I'll redirect that to $path. And so like every single one of these lines that I don't need to touch, I could just using what I've already learned, things like I'm not trying to show any new fancy techniques here, just putting it into a variable and sending that variable off to where the data needs to actually get written. So it's a little bit of typing. Whoop, let's do our redirect to $path. Okay, echo open quotes, send this one to $path. I'll send my auto LO, which configures my loopback address, echo, whoops, let's go the other way. We'll go here to $path. Becomes a little bit of a typing exercise at some point, or you're going to start learning, hey, copy and paste is a thing, to $path. But what I really just want to show here is that this, of course, is not a very high intelligence way to solve the problem. It's kind of a low intelligence, but sort of almost brute forcey way to actually just using the basic techniques we've shown. Like all we're doing is we got one variable and I've got a bunch of echoes that are going to this. This is not something that is very sophisticated. $path. And now we get to the part that's interesting, right? Because now this is the line here, if I'm doing a static configuration, that I might want the user to actually change, to be able to change your IP address, all right? And so instead of just blindly echoing this is really where I would want to have something like a read statement, right? I could read in the information and have this information then be echoed out as the variable that was created. So I don't want to have some IP address that's hard-coded in here. I would want to have something like $IP, right? Write the information of whatever the user types inside here. So something like echo open quote. I still kind of have the tab in there, $IP to my $path. And same thing with the mask, right? I don't want to hard code in a mask. I want to ask the user, what's the mask that you want to write? And of course, I'll also start this with an echo open quote. All right, so now I've got this saying I'm going to echo out these variables, and this is what I want to read from the user. So whatever the user types can go into this line for both the IP and the mask. Now, here's a good technique that we want to make sure we emphasize. I'm going to do the reads before I write any of the information. And kind of where I'm going with this is what you don't want to have happen when you run the script. I don't want to write a whole bunch of information, get down to here, and then the user says, Control C, I don't actually want to do this. I didn't mean to run this script. And now you've kind of got a broken, overwritten file that never made it all the way to the end. And so I'm kind of just ordering things that I'm not going to write anything unless the user gives me an IP address and actually gives me a mask. But we could do that with these read statements, right? Read -p, open quotes, and then this is where I'd say like, please enter the desired IP, colon, space, and then I called it IP, right? That was the variable that I kind of set for myself down here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with a read-p, please enter the desired mask. And I could call that one mask, right? So that's what will assign these variables. So none of the writing is actually going to happen until the user gives me both an IP address and a mask, okay? And after this, of course, if you think about this, I'm going to write this information to a file. What I would want to have happen after this information has been written is I want to restart my networking, right? So I could then put the restart networking command right in here, systemctl restart networking. And maybe to confirm it worked, I'll type in IPA, right? And so now I'm giving all of the commands I would have normally done as part of a routine statically reconfigure my address. And I use the existing file sort of as a template. So then I just didn't have to retype everything. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. Control X, Y, enter. Sure. So I have an interfaces file. It doesn't have execute permissions, which is why none of the color coding was working quite right. So let's go ahead and give ourselves execute permissions. We can do that with a chmod. I showed the 755 before. Another good way to do this is you can use plus or minus if you wanted to remove a permission, but you can say plus and then the R, W, or X. So do you want to add read permission? Do you want to add write permission? Do you want to add execute permission? So chmod plus X is a way to say add execute permission to this particular file. And then you don't have to know the numbers quite as well. I still like to learn the numbers because then you can fine tune the owner as opposed to everyone else. Whereas with this, as you'll see, what this ends up doing when you do plus X, it'll give the execute permission here on my interface file. You see, everyone got it. All right, both the owner, the group, and everyone else was able to get the execute permission. So I now have a script called interfaces, and it now has execute permissions. And maybe just to, again, kind of follow the normal, writing of how we name a lot of these things, I'll add on a .sh. So I'll rename the file, in other words. I'll move my interfaces file to just a new file name. And so maybe I'll call it like interfaces.sh, sure. So now when I've got my file, it now looks more like a script. It has the right permissions. It's got a file extension that indicates to the user, like, yeah, this is supposed to be a shell script. And if I go back into my script just to make sure I don't have any obvious typos, you can see now all the color coding is all nice because we've gone and added in the execute permission for that. So I've got a path of /etc/network/interfaces. I ask the user for the desired IP address, the desired network mask. I then kind of, in a very brute force, caveman grab script bash interface file approach, kind of rewrite the entire file, right? And by rewriting the entire file, I'm able to put all of the necessary information back into this file, restart my networking, and then check to see if it worked. Like, okay, that's fine. Let's actually pull the trigger on this and see if this works. So I've got a 172.20.0.2 address right now. Maybe I'll try changing it to a 172.20.0.3. You know, I won't make a major change, but I'll at least make some kind of change. And I'll have to realize, like, in order to actually restart my networking, that's going to require sudo. In order to do all of those redirects and write the data to the interfaces file, that's going to require sudo. So I should, when I run this script, I definitely should be running this script with sudo. So sure, sudo./interfaces.sh. Please enter the desired IP address, 172.20.0.3. That's what I'd like to change this to. We'll keep the mask as 255.255.0.0. And it goes and reconfigures my networking and spits out my IPA, and there we go, 172.20.0.3. So definitely a really cool thing to be able to do, just understanding with very, very low intelligence level here. We've found a way with this interfaces script using really just a file path going to a variable, a couple reads, and then a whole bunch of echoes redirecting data. Like, you kind of could go and remake a bunch of configuration files just in a very simple scripted way. Now, I am definitely emphasizing, all right, we're going to go, I am definitely emphasizing, this is not an intelligent way to solve the problem. All right? Like, there are much better, more intelligent ways to solve the problem, and I hope perhaps your gears are already thinking of how could I make this more intelligent. We definitely should be thinking there also are some major gotchas or pitfalls that the user could very quickly fall into when they do this. For example, what if they don't type in a valid IP address? What if they typed in hello, right? This script doesn't check for anything like that. We're not doing any input validation. So like I said, this is the caveman smash problem with simple script approach. I guess I'm not shy. I'm not shy about saying when I'm starting out with scripting, I sometimes have simple, unsophisticated solutions to solving a simple, unsophisticated problem of, well, how do you restart your networking? There will be some gotchas, and obviously you can spend more time learning more about scripting and learning more about some input validation and making sure that things are not going to create problems. And maybe in some future videos, we'll take a look at how to take some of that stuff on. But for now, we're kind of opening the door to the power of scripting and seeing how it might be useful in a competition environment by taking some of your configuration files, reconfiguring them quickly, especially now you'd have a script that you could share with other users on your team. You know, anyone could go and run the script. You could make the script once and share it with a few other users, and now they would have the ability to recreate things quickly as well. And a lot of this was all just done with a backup file, really, right? I made a copy of the file, and a lot of the valid information that I want is already in the file. You know, it becomes part of the script just sort of as a natural matter of fact. So anyways, and of course you could use the T command. There's a lot of other ways that you could go about doing this that might be a little quicker, but I think this way really spelled out some of the important things I was trying to hit on here in this video. So, okay, let's continue on to a few other things though in the next series.